For most parents, seeing their child win a major competition is one of those moments they talk about for the rest of their lives. For me, it was watching my daughter walk off a stage with a trophy nearly as big as she was and a grin that looked permanently glued to her face. She'd spent years practicing the cello. While other kids spend afternoons glued to tablets, she spent hers wrestling with scales, bow techniques, and music sheets that looked like ancient treasure maps. There had been squeaky notes, broken strings, frustrated tears, and enough practice sessions to drive our neighbors slightly insane. But it paid off. She won first place at a regional youth music competition. The prize wasn't money. It was something even better, an invitation to an elite summer music camp attended by some of the most talented young musicians in the state. When the acceptance letter arrived, she practically launched herself across the living room. "Dad! Dad! I got in!" I hugged her so hard I nearly crushed the envelope. We celebrated with pizza, ice cream, and a complete suspension of all healthy eating rules. For one night, everything felt perfect. The camp wasn't cheap, but I'd prepared for that. Over the previous 2 years, I'd slowly saved every spare dollar I could. Birthday money, tax refunds, overtime pay, everything went into a dedicated fund for opportunities exactly like this. A few months earlier, I temporarily moved the money into an account my parents managed because I was switching banks and didn't want the funds tied up during the transition. At the time, it seemed harmless. After all, they were my parents. What could possibly go wrong? A week later, I called the camp office to finalize payment. The woman on the phone sounded confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but we haven't received your tuition payment." I laughed. "That's impossible." She checked again. "It still shows unpaid." My smile disappeared. After hanging up, I logged into the account. Then I checked again. Then a third time. The balance was almost zero. I stared at the screen. Surely there was a mistake. Maybe the website was broken. Maybe I'd clicked the wrong account. Maybe I'd suffered a minor stroke. I called my parents immediately. Mom answered. "Oh, hello, sweetheart. Where's the money?" A brief pause. "What money?" "The camp money." "Oh, that money." I immediately disliked her tone. "What happened to it?" Another pause. Then came the sentence that would permanently damage my faith in humanity. "We borrowed it." I nearly dropped the phone. "You what?" "Borrowed it." "Why?" "It was important." "What was important?" My father grabbed the phone. "Your sister needed help." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. My sister had spent most of her adult life treating financial responsibility like a dangerous infectious disease. What exactly did she need? Dad cleared his throat. "A swimming pool." I waited. Surely there would be more. There wasn't. "A swimming pool?" "Yes." "A pool." "Correct." "The thing filled with water?" "That's generally how pools work." I looked toward my daughter, who was practicing in the next room. She had no idea her music camp money had apparently transformed into recreational backyard plumbing. "Why would you spend her camp money on a pool?" Mom jumped back onto the call. "It's for the children." "What children?" "Your sister's children." I felt a headache forming. "What do her children need a pool for?" My parents answered with absolute confidence. "They're future Olympic swimmers." Silence. Complete silence. Finally, I asked the only reasonable question. "Since when?" "They show tremendous potential." I had seen these children. One couldn't dog paddle. One was afraid of deep water. The third considered floating on an inflatable donut a competitive sport. "Tremendous potential?" I repeated. "Absolutely," Mom said. Dad added proudly. "This could be the start of something huge." I rubbed my forehead. The more they talked, the worse it got. Apparently the pool wasn't an expense. It was an investment. An investment in future gold medals. Future sponsorships. Future championships. Future greatness. Meanwhile, my daughter's actual achievement, The one involving years of discipline and hard work had apparently been demoted below backyard cannonball fantasies. When I finally ended the call, I sat quietly at the kitchen table. My daughter walked in carrying her cello. She took one look at my face. Bad news? I nodded. The camp money is gone. Her eyes widened. What happened? I sighed. Your grandparents lent it to your aunt for a swimming pool. She blinked. A swimming pool? Apparently your cousins are future Olympic swimmers. My daughter thought about that for several seconds. Then she asked a question so perfectly logical that I had no answer. Do Olympic swimmers usually spend more time eating popsicles than swimming? And honestly, that was the moment I realized this situation was somehow going to get much, much worse. The next morning I drove to my parents' house determined to have a calm, rational conversation. That plan lasted approximately 12 seconds. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I saw the pool. It wasn't some modest above-ground pool from a discount warehouse. This thing looked like a small water park. There was a decorative waterfall. There was a twisting slide. There were expensive lounge chairs. I was fairly certain I spotted a miniature tiki bar. The camp money hadn't disappeared into a pool. It had disappeared into a luxury aquatic kingdom. My sister came bouncing out of the house with a giant smile. Isn't it amazing? I stared at the backyard. Amazing isn't the word I'd use. She ignored that. Come on. I'll give you the grand tour. Before I could protest, she was already walking around the pool like a real estate agent showing off beachfront property. Here's the shallow end. I nodded. That's where pools usually start. And over there is the waterfall. Fascinating. The kids absolutely love it. As if summoned by magic, her children appeared. This was apparently my chance to witness the future of Olympic swimming. The first future champion sprinted toward the pool. I watched carefully. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe hidden athletic greatness was about to reveal itself. The kid jumped. Not into the water. Onto an inflatable pizza slice. He spent the next 5 minutes drifting in circles while pretending to be a pirate. Interesting strategy. The second future Olympian approached the water. Then stopped. Mom! What? The water is cold. It's 80 degrees. It's still cold. He sat down in a chair and opened a bag of chips. Another remarkable display of competitive spirit. The third child finally entered the pool. Unfortunately, he was wearing bright orange inflatable arm floaties. The water barely reached his waist. I blinked. Why does he need floaties? My sister shrugged. They make him feel confident. The child immediately attempted a cannonball. The resulting splash soaked half the patio. He emerged from the water screaming, I'm the king of the ocean! My sister clapped enthusiastically. I turned toward my parents. This is your Olympic program. Dad crossed his arms. Great athletes start somewhere. The pizza pirate crashed into the pool wall. The chip-eating swimmer refused to enter the water. The king of the ocean was now trying to balance a beach ball on his head. I wasn't seeing much athletic development. My mother lowered her voice. You need to be more supportive. Supportive of what? Their dreams. What dreams? Olympic gold medals. I laughed. Actually laughed. That turned out to be a mistake. Nobody else was laughing. They were serious. Completely serious. My sister suddenly began talking about future sponsorships. Oh, just imagine. Swimming commercials. Sports endorsements. National championships. I looked around. One child had become trapped inside a giant inflatable donut. Another was attempting to fish leaves out of the water using a pool noodle. The third was asking if Olympic athletes were allowed to nap during competitions. The future looked uncertain. Meanwhile, my daughter stood quietly beside me. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't complaining. She wasn't demanding revenge. Instead, she asked, Dad, maybe I can apply for a scholarship. The maturity difference between her and the adults around us was becoming uncomfortable. My parents had stolen her opportunity. Yet somehow she was acting more responsible than all of them combined. That should have embarrassed everyone. Instead, my sister pointed toward the pool. See? She's fine. I nearly choked. She's fine because she's trying to solve the problem you created. Dad sighed dramatically. You always make everything sound negative. Negative? You took money from a music camp. It was temporary. When are you paying it back? Nobody answered. That silence told me everything. The money wasn't coming back. At least not voluntarily. As the argument continued, I noticed someone sitting quietly at a patio table. Grandma. She hadn't spoken much all afternoon. She simply watched. Observed. Listened. Every excuse. Every contradiction. Every ridiculous claim. At one point my sister proudly declared that her children trained every day. Unfortunately, one of the children immediately shouted from the pool. Mom! Does floating count as exercise? Grandma slowly raised an eyebrow. Later, Dad claimed the kids had been taking swimming lessons for years. Grandma raised her other eyebrow. The collection of suspicious facial expressions continued growing. Eventually she stood up and walked over. Interesting. Everyone became quiet. Grandma wasn't a loud woman. She didn't need to be. What? My mother asked nervously. Grandma smiled. Oh, nothing. That smile worried me. I'd seen it before. Usually right before somebody's lies exploded. She looked at my sister. How long did you say the children have been training? Several years. Grandma nodded. Then she looked at Dad. And when exactly did you decide to borrow the camp money? Dad hesitated. Recently. Grandma nodded again. The smile grew wider. For the first time all day, my parents looked uncomfortable. Grandma glanced toward the pool where one of the future Olympians was attempting to launch a watermelon off the diving board. Then she turned back toward the family. Interesting, she repeated. And somehow that single word sounded less like curiosity, and more like the beginning of an investigation. Most people make the mistake of thinking Grandma was retired. She wasn't. She had simply redirected her energy from employment to investigating family nonsense. And according to her, our family provided an endless supply of material. 3 days after the pool incident, she called me. I need copies of everything. Everything? The camp acceptance letter. The tuition invoice. Account statements. Text messages. Every single thing. I laughed. You sound like a detective. No. A brief pause followed. A detective gets paid. Then she hung up. That should have worried me. Over the next 2 weeks, Grandma launched what can only be described as a one-woman federal investigation. She visited relatives. She made phone calls. She requested documents. She asked questions nobody else thought to ask. Most importantly, she possessed a terrifying superpower. People told her the truth. Maybe it was because she was 80 years old. Maybe it was because she baked incredible cookies. Maybe it was because lying to her felt like kicking a puppy. Whatever the reason, information started pouring in. The first bombshell arrived during another phone call. Your parents lied. I wasn't surprised. You'll have to be more specific. The pool project started months ago. That got my attention. What? Grandma explained that she'd obtained copies of contractor estimates. The initial planning meetings had occurred long before the camp acceptance letter arrived. Long before anyone supposedly borrowed the money. The pool wasn't an emergency. It wasn't a sudden opportunity. It wasn't an unexpected expense. The entire thing had been planned from the beginning. The camp fund had simply become a convenient source of cash. That revelation alone made me furious. Then Grandma kept talking. Apparently the spending hadn't stopped with the pool itself. There was a luxury slide. An upgraded filtration system. Decorative landscaping. A custom waterfall. Outdoor speakers. Expensive patio furniture. At one point Grandma read numbers from a receipt. I nearly dropped my phone. You're kidding. I never kid about accounting. The deeper she dug, the worse everything became. Meanwhile, my daughter continued practicing her cello. She even started researching scholarships and alternative music programs. Every time I saw her working hard despite everything, my irritation grew. She had earned her opportunity. My sister's children had earned sunburns. Those were not the same thing. A few days later, Grandma called again. This time she sounded delighted. That was never good news for whoever she was investigating. I found the swimming lessons. The what? The Olympic training program. I sat down immediately. This sounded promising. Grandma explained that my sister had enrolled all 3 children in swimming lessons the previous year. For a moment I thought perhaps I judged them too harshly. Then Grandma continued. They quit. How long did they last? The oldest completed 2 classes. I nodded. What about the others? 1 class. I waited. And the third? Grandma actually laughed. He cried because his goggles made him look like an insect. I covered my face. The future Olympic dynasty was collapsing rapidly. According to the instructor, none of the children had shown much interest in competitive swimming. They preferred games, snacks, pool toys, basically everything except actual swimming. Yet somehow my parents had transformed them into future champions worthy of stealing a music education fund. The absurdity was becoming almost impressive. Soon other relatives began hearing pieces of the story. An aunt called me. Then a cousin. Then another cousin. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Wait, they did what? By the end of the week, half the family was asking questions. My parents and sister became increasingly defensive. The more questions people asked, the stranger their explanations became. One day the pool was an investment. The next day it was family support. Then it was a loan. Then it was temporary assistance. The story changed so often it deserved its own television series. Meanwhile, Grandma continued collecting evidence. Bank statements, receipts, messages, contractor invoices, swimming lesson records. She organized everything into a massive folder. Color-coded, alphabetized, cross-referenced. At one point I asked how many documents she had accumulated. Enough. Enough for what? Several convictions. I wasn't entirely sure she was joking. Finally she called with an announcement. There will be a family barbecue next Saturday. I immediately understood. Oh no. Oh yes. What are you planning? Nothing. That answer was terrifying. Because whenever Grandma said she was planning nothing, history suggested she was actually planning everything. Saturday arrived. Relatives from every branch of the family accepted the invitation. Everyone assumed it was a normal gathering. Everyone except me. I knew better. When I arrived, I spotted Grandma walking across the backyard carrying a thick binder. The thing looked heavy enough to stop a bullet. My parents noticed it too. Their smiles disappeared instantly. My sister stared at the binder. What's that? Grandma smiled sweetly. Just some paperwork. The look on her face suggested that paperwork was about to become the most dangerous word in the English language. For the first time since this entire disaster began, I saw genuine panic flicker across my parents' faces. And I suddenly had a feeling that the family barbecue was about to become the most memorable event any of us had ever attended. The barbecue began exactly the way my parents had planned. They expected compliments. They expected admiration. They expected everyone to gather around the pool and celebrate what a wonderful investment it was for the future Olympic champions of the family. For the first 30 minutes, everything seemed normal. Burgers sizzled on the grill. Children ran through the yard. Relatives chatted beneath patio umbrellas. My sister floated around the backyard like a celebrity at her own movie premiere. Isn't the waterfall beautiful? Look at the slide. The kids absolutely love it. The kids did love it. At that moment they were attempting to see who could create the biggest splash without actually swimming. Then Grandma stood up. The conversation gradually died down. She was carrying the binder. The binder. The one that had haunted my parents' dreams all week. Grandma cleared her throat. I'd like everyone's attention. My father immediately looked nervous. My mother suddenly became fascinated by a potato salad. My sister looked like she wanted to disappear into the pool filter. Unfortunately for them, Grandma had already begun. I have an announcement. The relatives gathered closer. Grandma opened the binder. The sound alone made my parents flinch. Several pages later, she held up a document. Many of you have heard that this pool was funded because 3 future Olympic swimmers needed support. A few relatives nodded. Grandma smiled. Interesting story. Then she held up bank statements. Unfortunately, the money actually came from a music fund belonging to a young girl who earned a place at an elite summer music camp. The crowd became silent. My daughter shifted uncomfortably beside me. Grandma continued. Specifically, the money was transferred from her education fund directly into this project. She displayed copies of the transactions. The evidence was impossible to argue with. Several relatives immediately turned toward my parents. My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Grandma wasn't finished. Not even close. She produced contractor invoices. One after another. Waterfall upgrades. Luxury slide. Premium landscaping. Patio furniture. Outdoor speakers. Someone whistled. An uncle muttered, "That's not a swimming pool. That's a resort." Laughter spread through the crowd. My sister attempted damage control. "It's still for the children." Grandma flipped another page. "Excellent point." Then she produced the swimming lesson records. The entire family leaned forward. The oldest child completed 2 classes. The second completed 1. The third quit after approximately 20 minutes. Grandma read the instructor's note aloud. Several relatives immediately burst into laughter. My cousin nearly dropped his drink. My sister turned bright red. Then fate decided to contribute. At that exact moment, one of the future Olympians launched himself off the diving board in a spectacular cannonball. Water exploded everywhere. Guests screamed and jumped back. The child surfaced triumphantly. "Best cannonball ever!" Another child shouted from a lounge chair. "I don't even like swimming!" The timing was so perfect that half the family started laughing uncontrollably. Even I struggled to keep a straight face. Grandma calmly closed the binder. Then she delivered the speech everyone had waited years to hear. She spoke about fairness. About responsibility. About how supporting one child should never require stealing opportunities from another. She spoke about favoritism. Decades of it. The endless excuses. The endless special treatment. And for the first time, nobody interrupted her. Nobody argued. Because everyone knew she was right. When she finished, the silence felt enormous. Then something unexpected happened. My aunt walked forward. She handed my daughter an envelope. "For music camp." A cousin followed. "So she can chase her dream." Then another relative stepped forward. And another. And another. Within minutes, family members were contributing money. Some gave large amounts. Some gave small amounts. Every dollar carried the same message. They believed in her. By the end of the afternoon, the entire camp tuition had been covered. My daughter cried. I nearly did too. Across the yard, my parents looked completely defeated. For once, nobody was praising them. Nobody was defending them. Nobody was buying their excuses. A month later, my daughter attended the music camp. She worked harder than ever. She made friends. She learned from incredible instructors. Most importantly, she proved she belonged there. A few months after that, my parents and sister repaid every dollar they had taken. Not because they wanted to. Because Grandma made it clear that refusing would become the family story repeated at every holiday until the end of time. Nobody doubted her. Several months later, I attended my daughter's recital. She stood confidently on stage with her cello and performed beautifully. The audience rose for a standing ovation. As I applauded, I thought about everything that had happened. The stolen money. The ridiculous excuses. The investigation. The barbecue. The legendary binder. Later that evening, I drove past my sister's house. The expensive pool was still there. So were the future Olympic swimmers. One floated on an inflatable pizza slice. Another was asleep in a lounge chair. The third was attempting to balance a beach ball on his nose. Not a single lap was being swum. I couldn't help laughing. My daughter had earned her success through talent, discipline, and determination. The pool had earned exactly what it deserved. A family legend that would be told for years. And somewhere inside her house, I was absolutely certain Grandma was still keeping the binder. Just in case anyone forgot the day she exposed every last one of them.